All right, and I think that we're live. Welcome everyone. If you're new here, my name is Angela, and today we are going to go ahead and build this layout. Let me see here, we'll get this a little bit bigger. This is a Photoshop mockup that I've had for ages, maybe 10 years or so. It's a pretty straightforward layout, and we're just going to go ahead and build this with HTML and CSS. Maybe use a little bit of Flexbox. And yes, we're going to use vanilla CSS. I'm not going to do anything with Sass. I don't use less, I mostly use Sass. And let's go ahead and get started. So, yeah, we'll keep this right here. So, well, let's look at this a little closer. This does it explicitly say it's a 12-column layout? And I pretty much treat everything like a 12-column layout, even when it's not specified. This is. I tend to not get in and count pixels because I think that's a very bad approach when you're building layouts. So I tend to treat everything like a 12-column layout, keeping things as flexible and responsive as possible. The best approach when you're building a new layout is to go top to bottom. So we're going to start with the header, we'll do a banner, we'll do a 2-column content layout with image on the left, content on the right. We'll put in a full width Instagram feed on the bottom. I don't know yet if I'm going to do an actual feed, but we'll put in some placeholders just to get us started. And then we have a very low profile small footer here on the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and use VS Code. Let's go ahead and we'll just call this index.html. And I'm going to go ahead and do that. And the name of this template is called Soho. And let's just put some basic things in here to get started. We'll do a header, class header, and we'll do a main class main, and then we'll go ahead and do a footer with a class of footer. And just to get something on the page, I'm just going to put in some Lorem ipsum inside each of these containers. And I'll save this, and I have an extension installed, if you don't have this already, called Live Server. This is a great extension for local development, especially if you're just working with HTML, CSS, and a little vanilla JavaScript. So I'm going to go ahead and click Live Server, and this automatically gets us running here in the server. So let's move our windows around a little bit so it's easy to get back and forth. And again, my approach is very top to bottom. So let's open this up here, make it a little bigger. So we have this very low profile header with 1, 2, 3, we have 7 items. We have an hourglass on the far right, and we have a hamburger menu on the far left. Let's go ahead and grab some icons, and I like to use Ionicon because they're free and they're simple. So let's look for a search. Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and grab this as an SVG, and I have a project folder. Let's go ahead and add a new folder. I'm going to call these assets, and we'll save it right there. Let's see if they have a hamburger menu, although we'll put this in right now. I think when we get into the styling, I will actually make that from scratch, and maybe we can animate that. But for now, let's just go ahead and put that in as a placeholder. And so for this type of header, we will want 3 containers. So we'll want the 2 icon containers at the top and bottom, and then we'll have navigation in the middle. So for our header, I'll take this Lorem ipsum out. And to get started, I'm going to create, we're going to make each of these icons, we're going to make these buttons, because buttons indicate that you're performing an action. Buttons are not necessarily navigation in this instance. We're performing an action. So the hamburger menu would be to open and close navigation, a drawer containing menu items, and the search icon would be presumably to open up a search input. So that's ideal for the button. And then we'll use a nav for the main navigation. So I'm going to say button class, I'll say button class icon to get started. And then we're going to go ahead and just put our SVG right in there. So I'm just going to copy and paste this right in. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Highlight, copy. And then I'm also going to put in a span, and we'll write CSS to cover this, but this is going to be a span class access hidden. And then we're going to say, we're just going to call this menu. And then we also want to add, let me see here, we're going to say aria labeled, I think it's aria labeled by, and we'll have to have an ID here also. Aria labeled by, I think that's right. And then we want to say aria, we want this to be aria hidden, meaning we don't want a screen reader to read this out. So it's going to be aria hidden true. And this is so the screen reader will read the word menu, but it will not try to read this SVG. So after this first button, we'll add a nav with a class of navigation. And I generally make my nav items unordered lists. So we'll go ahead, we'll do a list item, and what do we have here? Home, features, pages, categories. Home. Features, pages, should probably capitalize these. And one of the reasons I really wanted to start doing these live streams is because I think it's really important to watch other developers troubleshoot. Just see how other developers work, see how they troubleshoot problems. I think it's important to remind especially new developers that yes, even though a more experienced developer is more experienced, we don't remember everything. We don't remember every single aria label and when we should use it. We have to read documentation. We have to refresh our memories. Totally normal experience. And that's something that I want new developers especially to realize you don't have to remember everything. What's I think most important is that you understand that you take really good notes, you have a good like little snippet folder, but that you're just good at reading documentation and troubleshooting the things that you don't remember. All right, let's get started. So now we have our icon, our navigation, and then let's do one more button. And I'm going to give this again a class of icon. And if we have to come back here and give these unique classes, we definitely can. But I think we're going to end up styling these pretty much identically. So again, we'll do a span with a class of access hidden. And this is going to be search. Next, let's put in, we can close this. Next, let's put in our search outline. Right in there. And we want to make sure again that this is accessible. Oops. So this is aria labeled by, we'll give this an ID. I might have to go check and make sure I'm doing that right. I just did this on something that I was working at in my day job. Pretty sure that this is how I did it. We'll call this the search icon, aria labeled by search icon, and we want this to be aria hidden, so it's not getting read out to true, aria hidden true, so it's not being read out to screen readers. And now if we go over to, you can see here, this is perfect. This is exactly how I would expect this to work, to look. And I'm not going to style any of this or even attempt to style any of this until I have all of my structure, everything that's represented in this mock-up, until I have all of this laid out. All right, let's get back to it. Okay, so we have the basic elements of the header. Oh, maybe we want to go ahead and put in our hrefs. Whoops. There we go. So now those are links. There we go. Now those are links. Okay, what's next? So next we have a hero with the word Soho. I'm going to presume that Soho would be the H1 for the page. So after the header, inside our main class, let's go ahead and create a section. I'm going to go give this a class of hero. And I think it would be a good idea to, we probably want to, let me think about this for a second. This is the thing that I've been, I don't want to say that I've wondered, but this is the thing that I think about every time I start a new layout. How do I want how do I want to approach a hero image with text? I think I used to do this as a background image. I tend now to put in an image that is absolutely positioned, and then I absolutely position text over top of that. I think you can do it either way. Heroes, I have a tendency to hide heroes from screen readers because often they don't add a ton of value to the page. Now, not everybody agrees with that decision, and definitely I've been in a position with content creators and people who are really responsible for building those page layouts where they say, absolutely, that hero image adds value, it provides narrative to the page, we want that read out to the screen reader. So I'm going to do this the way that I generally approach this. If somebody out there disagrees or has a different approach, let me know. So we're going to go ahead and do a div with a class of background image, and then this will be an image, and then let's use what is it, Picsum. Yep, here we go, Lorem Picsum. And yeah, we can use this, and we'll give it a different size. So here's my source, but I'm going to make this 1600 by 1080. I think it's 1900 by 1080. Yeah. And then my placeholder alt text. Or here, we'll do something a little more semantic. We'll say Lorem Picsum random. There we go. Okay. And then beneath that, we'll do a div, and I'm going to call this a class of hero text. Yeah, we'll just call it the hero text. And we'll call it Soho. And there we go. Perfect. Yeah, I like that approach. It really just depends on the organization that you work for, how they approach things, how they like to do things. One moment here while I check on the stream. There we go. All right, so next we have this content area. So I'm going to say that this would be an H2. We have text on the right, we have an image on the left. So if this were a 12-column layout, I would actually say that, let's look and see here. My approach to this would be that this is maybe 45%, 45%, and then 10% in the center. So let's create another section. And this is going to be a class. We'll call this the main content. And we'll go ahead and do a div of I'm just going to call it 1/2, and this will have an image, and we'll do 1024 by 768 Lorem Picsum placeholder text. We'll also do 1/2. And we'll say Lorem 125. So we have a good chunk of text there. All right, one moment here. I'm getting these. One moment here, I'm having some issues with the stream. Pardon me while I check to see what the problem is. Okay. And I think it's okay. Sorry about that. I'll make sure that I add chapters below. So let's get back to it. So if you're on the replay crew, you can skip past this part. Okay, so my approach, I used to get really semantic with my class names back in the day. I would name it an image and all. Now I just, if I know that I have a 2-column layout and they are roughly 1/2 of each side, you know, 1/2 of the page, that's what I call them. And you'll see once we get into the styling why this is so much easier, this particular approach. So if we come back now and we look, we can see beneath this 2-column layout, we have a series of some images, or excuse me, some icons. So we have 5 icons, and let's just grab, maybe I'm just gonna grab for now one random icon, and we'll come back later when we're doing the styling and we'll actually grab unique icons. For now, I'm just going to grab one icon to represent our icons. All right, so we're still inside the main section. I think what I want to do is I want to put a div. I'm thinking about this. We're still inside the main section. And with the main content, no, I'm going to add another section. So we'll add another section, and we're going to give it a class of social. And again, I think we should treat these like links, because presumably you would click this and this would bring you to bring you off the site, bring you to a different page, and that is considered navigation. So we could even just treat this like navigation. So let's do that. And we'll say class social nav. And then I'm going to do another unordered list, and we'll do an li. And I'm not going to put anything in the href for now. I'm going to do a span with a class of access hidden, and we'll call the first one Instagram, and we should give it an ID of Instagram. And so now I'm just feeling like I should go and get these icons. Yeah, okay. All right. And what else do we have here? Whoop. Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, and a heart. Oh. Facebook. I think now it's X. Looks like they don't have an X logo, so I'm just going to add the logo formerly known as Twitter. And Pinterest. And we'll grab a heart. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So first we'll grab our Instagram. And I'm going to say Aria labeled by Instagram. And this is an Aria hidden. Sorry, I'm not speaking up. Aria hidden true. And I think we can just copy this and then replace. So next we have Facebook. Sorry if I'm not speaking up or directly into the microphone. I feel like I'm starting to mutter a little bit. Let's grab our Facebook SVG logo. There we go. And we want Aria hidden true. And yes, being a front-end developer sometimes, it can feel a little bit tedious. And that is okay. Sometimes we do a lot of copying and pasting. So here's our first three. I think our next one is Pinterest. aria hidden. True. All right, we're in the home stretch. The last is a heart. Just gonna call it heart. Oh, and I have to come back and update these. Call this a heart icon. Okay, so we have Pinterest icon. We have Twitter icon. And we have Facebook icon. So let's see how this looks in the browser. And this is exactly what I would expect to see. This is obviously gigantic. We'll take care of all of this with some CSS when we get to it. And if you're wondering, well, why are we putting in these spans with the name? And it's because we're going to write CSS to hide these words, hide what these icons are. That's a screen reader friendly way of not having the screen reader read out this SVG, but simply read out what this icon is, what this links to. And we'll write CSS to handle all of that. So let's see what else we have. So we're doing really well here, which is what I wanted. I wanted something that was really straightforward. We're doing well here. We have our header, our hero, our content. Oh, we forgot to put in the hello, so let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to add that. Here's our first section. So let's just go ahead and do an H2. And this is going to be a class of secondary header. The words hello. And then I don't think we put in, oh, and that's actually in the wrong place, isn't it? So let's take that and put that, I am going to put that above the main content, but below the hero. And then this hero text should actually be an H1. And we may decide that we need a little more markup to handle everything that we have going on in this hero. I actually think that we're going to need another container around this H1. We'll get to that once we actually start doing the styling though. So let's come back now. And we have this full width Instagram feed. So let's create another section right here. Whoops, I keep doing that. With the class of Instagram. And does it have a title? It does. So Instagram follow. So we're gonna do, let's also give this an H2 with a class of, well, it doesn't really, does it really look like, I mean, these look similar. I'm gonna give these both H2s, even though, and then we'll create a special class for this line underneath the hello. That's my executive decision. So I'm going to give this a class of secondary header, Instagram, and then I I don't like to put inline elements just sort of loosey-goosey without some sort of a container. So I'm going to put a set of paragraph tags around this href, this a tag, because paragraph tags, at least by default, are a block level element. And then that just, I don't know, structurally that just makes more sense to me. So I'm just going to say at, and I'm going to use my own handle. So now we have an h2 and a p tag, and then I'm going to put class Instagram feed, and then I don't know, I have a tendency to put these things inside of unordered lists. I don't know though if I would necessarily put this in an unordered list. There are 6 items. I'm just gonna do I mean, I guess we could. I don't know if it's been years since I've embedded an Instagram feed, so I don't know necessarily what their markup looks like. I guess just to keep it simple, we could do, I'm just gonna do 6 A tags. Let me see here. I don't like how the Emmet does that. But then I would have to make each of those block level elements, and I try to avoid doing that. I mean, there are lots of appropriate situations where something is an inline element by default and you change it to a block level element. Absolutely nothing wrong with doing that, but if I can find a default way of doing it without having to change it, that's my first preference. So let's just go ahead and make this an unordered list. And it's totally normal to, even with years of experience, it is totally normal to sit and think like, is this the best way to do this? Is this how I really want to do this? And once we come back in and we start styling, you'll change it. You'll change your mind. You'll decide that's not the best way to handle it. But at least this way, structurally, we're getting everything on the page. And in my opinion, it is the absolute best approach to building a new layout, is taking this top to bottom approach and getting all of your markup, all of your HTML, all of your placeholder text, thinking about the accessibility, the ARIA labels, the semantic use of an H1 and H2, a section, and getting all of that laid out. We may come back later and actually embed this Instagram feed and find out that Instagram had a completely different approach for what their markup is. In fact, just assume that that's what's going to happen. But for the purposes of just getting our layout built, I think using an unordered list makes perfect sense. And then I don't have to change things, change default display types to something else. That's my goal. So presumably these links would actually link back to an Instagram post. So for now, I'm just going to use a hashtag as the link. And then this is going to be an image. And then we'll have to make sure that we also have, do we need additional text to go along with our image if we have placeholder text? That is that's a good, interesting question. I'm actually not sure. I'm gonna say that since we have placeholder text for each image, we don't need any additional text. Something like this span that we used for our SVGs. I'm gonna say that we don't need this, and that the image itself with alt text is sufficient. So let's go ahead and grab. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and grab our Lorem Picsum. And I think 200 by 300 is fine. Yeah, I think this works. So let's just go ahead and copy this. 2, 3, 4, whoops, 5, 6. Let's see how things are looking here. And here's our images. Perfect. So I think the last thing we need to do here, is our footer. So let's take a closer look at our footer. So we have our copyright statement on the far left, we have the name of our site in the center, and we have a little designed by tag on the far right. We can achieve this pretty easily with Flexbox. There we go. So copyright 20, yeah, that's how old that is, 2016. I knew it was something like that. So in the footer, we are going to make 3 little divs. So the first one, and really, we do not need to, we're gonna start with, I think, just a class of 1/3. And we'll say, and copy all rights reserved. What else does it say? All rights reserved. I'm just going to use my own name because this is ultimately going to be a website for me. And then div dot 1/3. Made with, wait, heart. Is that still a thing? Heart, made with love in St. Paul, Minnesota. I don't think that's still a thing. It used to be, so we'll just say made with love. And I'll find, maybe we'll reuse our heart SVG there. Okay, so this is a really, really good start. We have all of our markup from top to bottom. Now we can get started actually styling some of this. And where else do we have? Ooh. Save. Yeah, this is looking really, really good. This is just such a great, solid way to get started building layouts. I used to do this really piecemeal in the first part of my career until I saw a video by Chris Coyer at CSS Tricks. I think I was watching him. I started the first part of my career building WordPress layouts, and I watched a video that he had done. At the time, it was called lynda.com. Now it's LinkedIn Learning, where he built a WordPress theme from scratch and used this approach. And it really stuck. I just thought it was a great way to approach it. Let's go ahead and set up some CSS. And again, we're just going to use vanilla CSS. I normally use Sass, which I think is a fantastic way of writing CSS. I know that there are other newer ways of using CSS or writing CSS shorthand. I still think Sass is great, but for the purposes of this video, I really want to just use vanilla CSS. I really want these videos to, I decided to start streaming these videos with new developers in mind. If you're brand new and you're trying to get the hang of CSS or Sass, and you're just trying to wrap your head around what even is the best way to approach or build a layout, I want to show people that we can absolutely do this with vanilla CSS. So let's start with, we're actually going to add 2 CSS files. We're going to use something called Normalize. And if you don't know what Normalize is, it is literally a way to normalize the browser. Here we go. Every browser has their own set of defaults for how they display default elements. And when you use a style sheet like Normalize, you normalize all of those features. So let's go ahead and add a link in our header. And the href is and then we'll add another link, style.css. And yes, if you're a more experienced developer and you're saying to yourself, but Angela, that's 2 calls to do 2 different style sheets. I realize that. We can combine all of that with Sass, but again, for the purposes of just getting comfy with building layouts, this is perfectly fine. So now we have a way to normalize the browser, and we should be able to see that. Let's make sure it's loading. Let's check our network tab. And we are loading Normalize. Excellent. Next, let's pick just a basic Google font. And I just want a sans serif, clean, no frills, open sans. I actually kind of like, is it Lato? Yes. So let's just grab Lato. Let's just grab Lato regular. I want Lato regular, and we'll do Lato bold. I think that's good. So we're gonna copy this and we're gonna put it above. I want this to go first. We don't need this. And we're gonna define so we're not necessarily going to define Lato this way, but I am going to include it in the style sheet so we have a reference to it. Now, the next thing that we need to do is we need to change some additional browser defaults. And where I generally get those are from my personal GitHub. Let's see here. So browsers by default use box sizing content box, which means that, let's say for example, you have a div and you say that that div is 200 pixels wide. When you start adding padding and margin and border, let's say you add 10 pixels of margin to a 200 wide pixel div. Now your div is 220, 10 on each side. We want to add additional padding and margin, but we don't want our container, our defined container, to get larger. So the way we do that is we can reset our browser defaults for any HTML element to be box sizing border box, not the browser default of box sizing content box. This is specifically why I do this. Next, we want to add just some basic body styles that will apply to everything. So I generally say margin 0, padding 0 on the body, and then we'll use these styles here for Lato. So our font family is Lato, the font weight is 400, the font style is normal. I'm going to say font size 100%. Browsers by default, the font size is 16 pixels. I define font size 100% and then I use a value called rems anytime I'm defining fonts throughout my style sheets. So now we have margin, padding, and I'm going to say that my font color is going to be, I generally use a dark gray. 222 is the value that I like to use. We should also define the line height, which is the amount of space in between each line. I generally do 1.65. Line height, I see people often use a pixel value or a rem value for line height, and line height should really be a multiple of whatever your font size is. So my line height is 1.65 times the font size, which is 100%. 100% of 16 pixels, which is the browser default font size. So if we save this, we will hopefully see Lato saved, and it is. We can see our CSS is loading, our Normalize is loading, and our own style sheet is loading. There we go. So now we can see our style sheet is also loading. This a little bit smaller. So let's start styling our header. So the first thing that I want to do, we'll go ahead and start with a class of header. And I want this to be display. Oh, you're not filling in for me. All right. This is going to be a display of Flex. We're going to use Flexbox. And one of the best resources for Flexbox, in my opinion, Flexbox CSS tricks. This page on CSS tricks is an excellent resource for Flexbox. I use this all the time. I bet at least 3 or 4 times a week I open this up to remind myself about something related to Flexbox. So I highly, highly recommend this. And I'm going to put as many of these links as I can, and I'll put all of these links into the description once the live stream ends. So we want this to be display flex. We want the flex flow to be, it's going to be a row, and I'm going to say no wrap. I don't want it to wrap. Well, actually, maybe we can say wrap, because on mobile we'll end up letting it wrap. And we can change this later if we decide to, but I guess this could wrap. We want to align items, and I'm going to say center, and we want to justify content space between. So let's look. You can see here it already did that. Next, let's get that navigation lined up. So I'm going to do a class of navigation. Navigation UL. I have to remember I'm not writing Sass, so I can't do my nesting, which is totally fine. I'm going to say display. Let me think about this here for a second. Wow, how long has it been since I've done this? I'm going to say list style type. List style type none. Yes. So basically we're removing the bullets. That's what we're doing. So we're removing our bullets. And then this is also going to be flexbox. So it's going to be display flex. And then everything's going to have a width, but I'm going to do that last. Display flex, flex flow is going to be, it's a row. And for now I'm going to say wrap, because it will need to wrap once it's on mobile. We'll say align items. We want them to be centered. And then we'll say justify content. Again, I'm going to say space between, so they all sort of evenly line up. So this is looking pretty good so far. I think I don't want to put defined widths on the menu or the search, but I do want to put a defined width on the navigation. I think I'm going to say 2/3, so I'm going to give it a width of like 60%. And the way we do that is we say flex 0, 0, 60%, which is going to give it 60% of the screen size. Let's see here. Oh, and we put that in the wrong spot. So we actually want to put that on navigation. One level up. Right there. Perfect, that's what I wanted. So this is now 60% of the screen space, but I'm not going to define these because they're pretty small, and by declaring justify content space between, you're saying, hey, everything in this container, spread it out so the first and the last item hug the sides of that container, and then evenly space everything else out. But you can see here that we have to remove some padding and margin, because it's not evenly spacing. You can see the orange there is margin, the green is padding. So we're going to go ahead and do that here. We're going to say, because the browser again gives it default values, so margin and padding. And now we can see, there we go. So we got rid of that margin and padding. This container is 60% of the width of this container. And then again, this justify content makes it ensures that your first item and your last item are hugging the sides of that container, and then everything else inside is evenly spaced between. And that's exactly what I want. That's my preference. So let's take this out and see what this looks like. It's pretty roomy, isn't it? 60%. We might want to, actually what we really need to do here is, I think we need to put a container all the way around this header. So let's go ahead and do a div, and we're going to give it a class of inner wrap. So we're going to wrap this entire thing inside. And what I tend to do is, for anything that that we have to wrap inside of a container, what I tend to do is make that about 75 rems, which is like 1200 pixels wide. So we're gonna say max width. Oh, you have to excuse me if that's annoying you. It's because I'm so used to VS Code auto-completing, but it's not because I'm writing vanilla CSS. That's why it's not auto-completing. So, and we'll do a margin of 0 and auto. And what that means is, this is shorthand. When you have two margin values, the first value is the top and bottom, the second value is the left and right. And when you're centering your elements, as long as you have a defined width on your element, you can do margin, top and bottom value, and the left and right values are auto, and that will automatically center those containers, which is exactly what happened here. But we need to adjust some sizing here. So here is max width 75 rems. Here's our header, our inner wrap. Oh yeah, we have to move our flex box. So we need to put our display flex box on the inner wrap, not on the header, which is totally fine. Move this here, and we'll say header. This. There we go. Yeah. I think that looks nice, so I'm happy with that. So next, let's make these not look like buttons. We'll get our background in here and we'll tighten this up a little bit. And we'll add a little bit of styling. Also, we'll remove those underlines. So the best way to remove the button appearance, I mean, we could come in here and we could just undo, here's our button. we could undo all the things that make this look like a button. The easiest way to do this, come down here, what did we call this here? With the button class icon, I'm just going to say button dot icon appearance none. And we do have to undo some things. So we're going to undo the border and the background, and we need to hide that text. So border none, and then background also none. And then we're going to write kind of a generic access hidden, and there we go. Let me CSS for access hidden class. Here we go. So we want, we're going to do this. All right, and so now we hit our span, so we just have to make sure that our button still has some structure here. So I'm going to say display block I'm going to say width, I think 35 pixels is a little big, but there we go. Yeah, I think that's okay. Let's get a little padding in here. So here's our header. Let's give this a background color. I'm a big fan of this dark gray 222. And then here's our navigation. Navigation, LIA. We're going to say text, decoration, none, and color is what's white, FFF. And then let's give our header also a little bit of padding. padding on the top and bottom, but I'm going to say 0 padding on the left and right. And we obviously need to change the fill color of our icons. And I think we also need to make our navigation items uppercase. I'm going to argue that, let's see here, if this says what. I mean, I think that in order for something to be accessible, it needs to be at least 16 pixels if it's normal font weight. And this looks much smaller than 16 pixels to me, so I'm not going to change. I mean, maybe we could bump it down to 15. I'm going to leave it at its current size, because that is the safe, accessible thing to do. Further down the road, as we continue styling, if we need to make this larger, we definitely can. So let's say text decoration, none. Text transform. Uppercase. And then let's give this some letter spacing. Just of 1 pixel. I think that's the safe thing to do. We might need to make that a little bit smaller. It's pretty big, isn't it? Font size, maybe, let's see here. I'm getting out my calculator. Oh, let's do this. Calculator. So if we know that 16, so 0.9375. 0.9375 rem, just to bump it down a little bit. Yeah, I wouldn't want to go any smaller than that. We could widen it out though. We could widen that out to about 2 pixels. Yeah, I think that looks good. Now let's work on our button icon SVGs. So we've got, it's an icon SVG, and we're going to change the fill. Anytime you change the fill color of an SVG, or the color of an SVG, generally it's the fill. So we'll make that white. These are probably borders, or they have a stroke width. So fill none, stroke current color. Okay. So we can either come in here and change the stroke. Let's see if it'll let us do it with CSS. Is it the same here? Stroke. All right, let's just change. There we go. Oh, and we have to change our there we go. So now we have our buttons and we have our navigation. I think we should give this a little more padding. to 20 pixels. Yeah, I think that's a little more comfortable. All right, so next, let's go ahead and style our hero. And this is .hero. And this is going to be position relative. And so I'm going to absolutely position the background image to the hero container. That type of positioning is really aggressive, but it's absolutely appropriate in situations like this, in my opinion. You could treat this image as a background image of the hero, but if you do that, you absolutely cannot call that out to the screen reader. So again, if you're working in an organization or an agency and you have a content person who's saying that that image needs to be called out by a screen reader, this is a great way to do it, and you just have a lot more flexibility. You can either leave the alt tag empty and the screen reader will just skip it, or you can add alt text and the screen reader will include it. But as long as you have it as part of the background, you really don't have the option to call it out to a screen reader. So this is a great way to do it. And then this H1, we'll just go ahead and position this like normal inside of the hero. This H1 doesn't need to be aggressively positioned. We're just going to define a height for this hero and then go ahead and position this inside the hero. So with the hero of position relative, we can take that hero background image and we'll say position absolute, and I usually say top 0, left 0, just to anchor it. Oh, and we do have to give our hero some height. We're gonna say a height of 400 pixels, and just for the heck of it, we'll say a width of 100%, just to make sure it fills the container. We want to say width 100% and height 100%. So now here's our hero, here's our background image, here's our there we go. So here's our hero section, which has the position relative. Here's our div background image. We could actually probably don't even need this div around the image. Kind of an extra container, isn't it? So let's just put this class on the image and ditch the div. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Go. So here's our hero, here's our image. But do you notice how the image is stretched? It's stretching to fill the container. So the way we fix that is we use object fit cover. And what that does is it proportionally puts the image inside the container. There we go. So here's the other issue that we run into though. The default positioning when you use the object fit is it anchors it from the top, and we know that there's more here to the image. So let's do this in the browser so I can give you a good example. We have object position. There's bottom, so we're pushing that image up and anchoring it from the bottom. Here's center. Here's left, right, top. This is pushing it all the way down. I guess that is the center. You could also use, I'm pretty sure that you could use values like 50%, 50%, and then you could, can you move these around? We'll do center for now. So let's see if we refresh. Let's go ahead and add this. And then every time there's a new image, there we go. It grabs the new image, and it always does it from the center. I think we have a little extra padding in here we want to take out. I bet it's in our you see this white bar here? We have a little extra padding that we need to get rid of. Right there. Okay. So let's do our hero text next. Oops. So this is hiding behind this. So we want to change the Z index is 0. Or do we need to do 0, 1? So now here's our H1. So let's go back to change that stacking order. So I really want to use Flexbox also for this, because it's just going to make it so much more easy to really position it in the correct spot. And in our mock-up, it's centered really nicely. So let's do that. So in the hero container, we're also going to do display flex flow row. I'm going to say no wrap, and then we'll say align items center, and justify content center. Is it center or middle? Let's check the CSS tricks. So we've got display, flex direction, flex wrap, flex flow, justify content center, and align items is also center. Perfect. And then the hero text will be, let's do margin 0, padding 0, text transform uppercase, and then let's give it some letter spacing. We'll do 2 pixels. And let's make this much bigger. And we'll say font size, maybe 4 rems. Yeah, definitely not super accessible, is it? And the mockup doesn't really do anything to indicate how we should handle that. It's not necessarily a good idea to put text over top of an image. And a lot of these low fidelity mockups don't address that. So there's ways that we can deal with that. Eventually, what we'll probably end up doing is putting, we'll put some sort of treatment over the image, some sort of treatment gradient with some opacity over the image. For now, I'm not too worried about it because we have this centered really well. If we hover on hero, you can see here that it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do in terms of the positioning. It's putting it, it's aligning it in the center, and it's justifying it also in the center. So along that X and Y axis. So I think that's really good. Let's see here though. This H1, I think H1s by default have a font weight of bold, so let's change the font weight on that. We might end up, I think what I'm going to end up doing is adding a lighter weight, the thinner version of this font, although that looks pretty good. The normal looks pretty good. And we'll go from there. But overall, I'm happy with this. Maybe I want to reduce a little bit of that padding. I think I bumped it up to 20 pixels. Let's bring it down to 15. Yeah, I think that looks a little better. And I know that this text is much larger than it is in the mockup, but in my opinion, in the mockup, it's too small. I don't think that's accessible. So I'm happy to err on the side of larger for the sake of accessibility. And of course, none of this is responsive yet. This is not, we're not really responsive yet at all. So as we continue to style this over the next couple of weeks, yeah, we're not going to get all the styling done today, but as we continue to style this over the next couple of weeks, we will get all of that. We're going to get all of that addressed. So this has been, I'm going to call this part 1. I think I'm done for today. I'm going to call this part 1. It's been just a little over 90 minutes. I am going to continue this next weekend. We're going to pick up where we left off in starting to style the body. We'll style our social icons, Instagram feed, footer. I'll look into seeing how it's been years since I've embedded an Instagram feed. I'm sure it's much different than it was the last time I did it. So maybe I'll look into this and see what it takes to get an Instagram feed in there. I think for sure I'll at least get some placeholders in there for styling, and we'll go from there. I hope this was helpful. I hope this gives new developers or even experienced developers who want to improve their layout skills an idea of how to approach these, building out something new. I had so much fun, and I hope that you join me again soon. Take care, everybody.